All right, guys. Happy Tuesday. Um, Miss seeing you guys. Hopefully, it won't be too much longer. Today, we get to do one of my favorite sections, definitely one of my favorite sections of this chapter, because I really enjoy solving equations. So, today, we get to solve equations that contain fractions. And I've kind of showed you how to do stuff like this a little bit before. I always recommend if there are fractions in a problem to multiply by the common denominator to get rid of those fractions, and then you have a nice and easy equation to solve. But with these rational expressions in your equations, you have to make sure that you check your original solution because sometimes the answer you get doesn't work within the context of a fraction because remember you can't have zero for a denominator of a fraction. So if you do get an answer that makes zero in the denominator, it can't be accepted. So the steps are to multiply by the least common denominator and then just solve it as per usual from there. So it's actually not too bad of a section. Should be a pretty easy day for you guys. So first thing you're going to look at is your denominators, and you're going to figure out what's the common denominator. So between 2, 3, and 6, I believe the least common denominator is 6. So we're going to multiply the whole equation by 6. Now what you have to remember is how do you multiply a fraction and a whole number? So you should remember that you divide by the denominator, and then multiply what's left to the numerator. Okay, so make that note in case you've forgotten. So we'll show that here. So you're going to take 6, you're going to divide it by the denominator. 6 divided by 2 is 3, and then 3 is going to get multiplied to the numerator. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 times x gives me 3x. The whole purpose of multiplying by that common denominator is we're no longer going to have fractions after that step. So I've got my plus sign, and then I continue doing the same thing. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 2 times 8 is 16. Got my equal sign. 6 divided by 6 is 1. 1 times 1 is again 1. And you see the answer or the equation that we get is very easy to solve. So it just takes 2 steps. First, we're going to subtract 16 to both sides of the equation, and 3x is going to equal negative 15. Divide by 3, and x is going to be negative 5. And then we just have to check, is there anything wrong with having negative 5? No, the only thing that matters is you can't have 0 in the denominator, and all of these denominators have normal numbers. It's never going to give us 0 in the denominator if there's no variable in the denominator. So this answer is going to be fine. If we look at 2, again, we're going to start by multiplying by the common denominator. So you got to figure that out. Between 2 and 9, it's 18. And between 18 and 18, it's clearly going to also be 18. So again, we're going to divide by the denominator, multiply what's left to the numerator. So 18 divided by 2 is 9. Now that means 9 is going to have to multiply to the whole numerator, so it's going to have to distribute. So it's going to be 9 times t, and then 9 times 4, 36. Okay. This next one, 18 divided by 9 is 2. So I'm going to distribute a 2, but it's not just a 2 because of that negative. So I'm going to write this one down just because I need to remember that the negative is going to be a part of that distribution as well. So negative 2, because 18 divided by 9 is 2, that negative needs to be accounted for as well. So we're going to distribute a negative 2 there, which is going to give us negative 2t and positive 6. I've got my equal sign, and then 18 divided by 18 is 1. 1 times 5 is 5. And then again, nice and easy equation to solve. We'd want to start by combining those like terms. I've got 9t minus 2t, that is 7t. And then I've got that negative 36 plus 6 That's negative 30. And then I still have my equals 5. And then from here, it's pretty good and easy to solve. We just add 30 to both sides of the equation. And if 7t equals 35, divide by 7, and t is going to be 5. Again, there's no variable in the denominator, so whatever answer I get is going to be fine. We just can't have 0 in the denominator for our final answer. So we'll move on and look at numbers 3 and 4 there. Okay, so again, we're going to figure out there's only one fraction, so the least common denominator is going to be that x. So we're going to have to, don't forget, you got to multiply it to everything, even if it doesn't have a fraction. So it's going to be x times 3. That's 3x. This one is a fraction, so x divided by x is 1. 1 times 6 is going to be 6, but don't forget that minus sign. Equals x times x is x squared. And then x times 8 is 8x. Okay, so I noticed that I have an x squared in this problem. So that's going to be one of those factoring type problems. So I've got to get my equation set equal to 0, and I want my x squared term to be positive. So that means I'm going to move everything from the left side of the equation to the right side of the equation. So I would do that by subtracting 3x and by adding 6. So those cancel on the left, and I would have 0 equals, and I just have a little bit of math over there to do. I would still have the x squared. 8x minus 3x is 5x, and then I've got my plus 6. So again, since I had that squared term, I'm setting it equal to 0 because I know I'm going to have to factor this. And this one factors very easily. I'm going to put the equals 0 over here on the right side because that's where I like it. It factors easy because there's no number in front of the first squared term. So we know we can go straight into our parentheses. We look at our sign. Our third sign is positive, so we use the sign of the second for both. So it's going to be x plus and x plus. Then we need the factors of 6. They are 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. I'm looking at the factors of 6 that add to make 5, and that would be 2 and 3. They add to make 5. So now that it's completely factored, we just have to set each factor individually equal to 0. So x plus 2 equals 0, x plus 3 equals 0. So that means that x would equal negative 2 if I subtracted 2 here, and if I subtracted 2 there, 3, I would get negative 3. I look at my solution, and this time I have to check. Would plugging in negative 2 make 0 for that denominator? No. Would plugging in negative 3 make 0 for that denominator? No. Both of these are fine answers. So sometimes you do get multiple answers, and that is okay. If we look at number 4, okay, a little bit tougher denominator this time. So again, remember, if you have a trinomial, you'll want to factor it. So we're looking at the our third sign is negative this time, so we're going to have x plus something and x minus something. And we're looking for the factors of 30 that subtract to make the understood 1. That's, of course, 5 and 6. It's got to be a positive 1, so that means the 6 would have to be positive and the 5 would be negative. So now that that denominator is factored, we can multiply by the common denominator pretty easily. So I'm going to put it in a bracket. And what's the common denominator between x plus 6 times x minus 5, x minus 5, and x plus 6? It's, of course, just going to be those things smushed together, x plus 6 and x minus 5. So we look at this first one. What's going to cancel in that first term? The x plus 6 would cancel each other out. The x minus 5s would cancel each other out. So I'm just left with that 4x. On the next fraction, I've got the x minus 5s that would cancel out. So that means the x plus 6 would be left. So it's going to be 2 times x plus 6. I think I'll write that one down. I don't want to make any mistakes. I've got my equal sign. Over here, I've got my x plus 6s that would cancel. So I have 1 times x minus 5 that would be left. All right, so from that, I'll go ahead and do my distributions. That would be 2x and 12. Over here, that's still going to be x minus 5. And this is a nice, easy equation to solve. I'll combine those like terms on the left side of the equation. So I've got 6x plus 12 equals x minus 5. From here, you'd probably subtract x from both sides of the equation. That's going to give us 5x. And then at the same time, you'd probably go ahead and subtract 12. And that's going to be negative 17 over there. Divide by 5, and it doesn't go into it evenly, so we're just going to leave it as that reduced fraction of negative 17 over 5. Now we just have to look, again, check our answers. What could x not be? X could not be negative 6, because that would make 0 in both of these denominators, and x could also not be 5. So since we didn't get either of those, this answer is perfectly fine. We'll flip it over to the back and do a few more examples. I think I just have a couple more of those. Okay, this one's nice and easy. What is the common denominator between all of those fractions? Well, clearly it's just the x minus 4, because that's the denominator for everything that has a denominator. So we're going to multiply by x minus 4 to the whole equation. So those x minus 4's would cancel, leaving us with the 2x. I'd have my equal sign. Those x minus 4's would cancel, leaving us with 8. And then I'd have to do 1 times the x minus 4. So I'll do that distribution. We would have 2x equals 8 plus x minus 4. From there, go ahead and combine those like terms. I've got the 8 and the minus 4 on the right side that are alike. So if I put those together, I'd still have the x, and then 8 minus 4 is positive 4, and still 2x. And from there, get all our x's to the left side of the equation by subtracting 1x, and 2x minus 1x is just 1x, and so it looks like x equals 4. So we have to go back to our original equation and look. If I were to plug 4 into this denominator, 4 minus 4 would give me 0 for that denominator. And we can't have 0 for a denominator because you can't divide by 0. It's against the rules. So this answer does not work, and there is going to be no real solution. So if you get an answer that produces 0 for the denominator, it's no real solution. I think 6 is a great time to pause your video and try that one and see if you can get it correct. And then we can compare answers, so let's see how you did. So the common denominator is x minus 2. On the first one, I would have x times x minus 2. I'll just write that one down. I'll do it in just a second. Next one, the x minus 2's would cancel each other out, leaving us with the 14. On the next one, again, the x minus 2's would cancel each other out, leaving us with the 7x. And on the last one, I'm going to write the distribution down, although it's kind of silly because it's multiplying by 1. All right, I'll do those distributions. I would have x squared minus 2x plus 14 equals 7x plus x minus 2. Okay, so again, this is one of those problems where we have an x squared in it. So I know I've got to set my equation equal to 0. And I would do that by, so this is 7x plus 1x is 8x, right? So I'm going to subtract 8x from both sides of the equation. And then also to get rid of that minus 2, we would want to add 2 to both sides of the equation. So those would cancel those out, and these would cancel each other out. And then we just do that little bit of math on the left. It looks like x squared minus 10x plus 16 equals 0. So we've got that trinomial nice and easy to factor because there's no number in front of that first term. We can go straight into the parentheses. My third sign is positive, so I use the sign of my second for both parentheses. It's going to be x minus and x minus. And the factors of 16 are 1 times 16, 2 times 8, and 4 times 4. I'm looking for the factors that add to make 10. And of course, that's going to be 2 and 8. And now that it's completely factored, we just set each factor individually equal to 0. Add 2 to both sides of this equation, and x would equal 2. Add 8 to both sides of this equation, and x would equal 8. We have to go back and check our solutions. Let's look at our first one, 2. If I plug 2 into that denominator, 2 minus 2, That's going to give me 0 in that denominator. So this one cannot work. However, 8 is fine because it gives me 6 for those denominators. So even though I got 2 solutions originally, only one of them is acceptable. So we just write down that one that would work. And then the last objective is it's this solving an equation whenever there's mostly just variables in it. So it's the same process, you just have variables in them instead. So you just say, what's the common denominator between a, b, and x? Well, that, of course, would be a, b, and x. So I'm solving this equation for x, by the way. I don't think I said that. So what would happen on the first one? The a's would cancel each other out. So I'd have 1 times bx. That's going to be bx. On the next one, the b's would cancel each other out. So that's going to leave me with the a and the x. And on the third one, the x's would cancel each other out. So that's going to leave me with the a and the b. Okay, so at this point, since we're solving for x, that means anything with an x needs to go to one side of the equation. Anything without an x needs to go to the other side of the equation. So we already have that here. All of my x's are already on one side of the equation, and things that don't have an x are on the other side of the equation. Once that's the case, you're going to factor out that x or whatever variable you're solving for that's in common. And then what would be left? The b and the a if we took the x away from each of those. And then one more step to get x by itself. What do? You divide, right? The x is multiplying to the b plus a, so to get rid of it, we would divide by b plus a. If I do that to one side, I have to do it to the other side. And I don't really need parentheses because it's the only thing in that denominator. And there's your solution. X is ab over b plus a. So it's kind of a weird one, but you'll see a few examples of that. Let me know if you need any help with anything. Please reach out to me. Whatever you need to do to get yourself good with the material. All right, we'll talk to you later. Have a great day. You know, it's a great day to be a mathematician.